Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can configure Neovim and hopefully how to also actually understand how your configuration works, which is why I've titled this presentation, if you will, Learn Neovim Configuration the Hard Way. But hopefully it won't be too hard. So we're going to go over, why you might want to use Neovim or like why I think you should configure it yourself, especially as well. The initial configuration, how the runtime path works, and also go a little bit into like configuring your Neovim with Lua. And I'll also leave a link to a written guide in case you prefer to like read through guides instead of actually watching videos. So yeah, let's jump right into it. So why Neovim? The whole point of using Neovim, in my opinion, is because it's customizable. Of course, if you just want to get up and running, you want to write code, then, you can use these kind of distributions available to you. But for me personally, the whole point of Neovim is you can customize it to however you want. And for this reason, I feel like it makes sense then to understand how your configuration actually works. So you can kind of configure it to be your own. So let's start by obviously setting up an initial configuration for Neovim. So like many Linux and Unix programs, your configuration lives in dot files in your home directory under the .config folder. So if you don't have this directory, you haven't ever used dot files before, it's fine. You just have to make a directory called .config at your in your home directory, and then inside of that you want to make another directory called Nevim. So we'll go over that in a second as well. So the reason we make this is because this is the entry point for when Neovim looks for any user-defined configuration. And how do I know this? Well, this is because it's actually in the Neovim documentation. So I think we can probably take a look at making an init.lua now. So if I go cd.config, obviously, again, if you don't have this directory, you can just make it. Inside of here, I'm going to make a directory called Nevim because I don't have one. And I'm going to cd into this directory. And I'm going to create a file called init.lua. I'm going to open it up with Neovim, but I'm not actually going to do anything with it yet. So if we do nvim init.lua, we're now in an empty file. So as it said on the slide, if you do :h lua-guide-config, so if I write :h space lua-guide-config, you can see in here, you can read this. Nvim supports using, either init or init.lua, using init.lua as a configuration file. This should be placed in your config directory here. Okay. And this means it's going to, anything that you write in this file, this init.lua file, will run on startup when you open Neovim. So if I do, for example, print hello world, classic programming kind of initial program, if I close this with WQ and we open it back up again, you can see it printed hello world because it opens this file up. When you run Neovim, it will open this file up and run whatever's inside. Obviously, we don't want this in here at the moment. So let's actually put a kind of mini configuration in here. So we're going to just add some like kind of default settings that you might want for Neovim. Now, Neovim comes, like I've written, with sensible defaults, which means if you are familiar with Vim or Neovim settings, you might be thinking, why are you not setting X, Y, or Z? Don't you need to set X, Y, or Z? So first, I'll actually set up this file so you can understand how it works. And secondly, we'll take a look at some of the sensible defaults that you might not need to set. So if I go back to my init.lua file, I'm actually just going to copy what I wrote here. So vim doc cursor line equals true. Now, of course, if you've written Lua before, or you want to like add local variables in here to make it a bit more efficient, by all means do it. But just to keep things simple, I'm just copying. We're going to write vim.opt for everything instead of putting this in a local variable. So vim.opt.relative number equals true. So now we have some settings. Again, we can write and quit. You can source the file directly within Neovim, but we're just going to write and quit, open it up again, and now you see we have these kind of numbers on the side here. So if I spam a bunch of empty lines, you can see we have a cursor line to show us what line we're currently on. We have numbers on the side, so 1 down to 14 there, and then we have relative number on, which might seem a bit weird. If you've never used Vim before, you might wonder why we might want to set this. Of course, it's your own configuration, so you don't have to. But the main reason is it allows you to jump up and down between sections quickly. So I can see, so in Vim, K goes up. I can see that vim.opt.number is 8 lines above me because it says the number 8 next to it. So I can do 8K and it'll jump me to that line. So that's where the relative numbers come in handy and why we've set that. So we have our basic configuration. This is obviously living in my config. And we know what's happening is, if I open up Neovim, right now I just type in nvim, it checks in our config, it looks to see if we have an init.lua file, and then it reads whatever's in it and runs it on startup. So it's going, okay, these are your settings. You now have, a cursor line, numbers on the side, etc. So another thing to understand here is, I've just said that Neovim looks inside this file when it starts up, and that's because it's on the runtime path. Now, the runtime path doesn't, Neovim doesn't just look for this one file. It can actually look for a lot of different files on startup. But for that to happen, these files need to be on the runtime path. So if I go nvim and do help, spamming slashes, if I do :h runtime path, this might look like gibberish to you, but basically, these here xdg config home/nvim, this is the folder we just set up, .config /nvim, right? And if we scroll down a little bit, we can see there's a list of directories here to be searched for runtime files. So outside of just our init.lua file, Neovim can look for other directories for other settings that we can set, or plugins can set, that will also load up on startup. So you can see there's some named ones here, colors for color scheme. So if we made a colors directory within our config and set some color scheme up, this would run on startup. We wouldn't have to do anything else. We wouldn't have to include it anywhere in our init.lua. This would also be added. And so there's also some other kind of named folders here, like keymap file, like a keymap folder, and all these different ones. So you might wonder, okay, so if we want to set up, a color scheme, do we just make a colors directory? And, by all means, you could. However, a lot of these directories are more being used by plugins or used internally, as opposed to how users tend to configure their configuration. So the directory which we will use, and what a lot of people use to configure Neovim, when you start getting more plugins and you install a plugin manager and you have key maps and key bindings and all these different things, is the Lua directory. So inside of our .config folder, we can add, inside of .config/nvim, we can add a Lua directory, which we can write arbitrary code in. So let's go back to the slides. So, how do you organize your configuration? This is where I've just talked about like the kind of recommended way to do this is through Lua, rather than these dedicated folders. Of course, again, it's up to you. It's your Neovim. The way you want to configure it is fine. But this is the way most people do it, and I would recommend to do it because you can just run any custom code in here. So the reason I use it mainly as well is for organizational purposes, and I think this is probably why most people use it, because if you put any settings in here, look, here's an example of what a kind of configuration might look like. You can see I can split it apart into some internal settings for myself, so keybinds and those settings we just set, or and we can also set up a directory for plugins, and this could go on and on depending how simple or complex your configuration is. And then all you have to do is require these modules into your main init.lua file. So if we do this live, if we just change our configuration, so we're in our Neovim folder, we have an init.lua. So if we make a directory called Lua, cd into it, and make a file, so the way files and folders works does change and how you include it in your init.lua, but let's just say, for example, touch, I'm just going to call this hello.lua, touch hello.lua, and I'm going to open this up in Neovim and just have it print hello world. And if I then go back to my initial configuration, so my init.lua file, at the top of this file, I'm just going to write require hello. Okay, write it and quit. And now next time we open Neovim, we can see right at the bottom of your screen here, it's printed hello world in the bottom left. So like I said, the way this works is you can put any arbitrary Lua kind of code inside of the Lua folder, and then we can include it into our init.lua to run it. So this is mainly for organizational purposes. So I hope this video has been somewhat helpful to kind of explain how different Neovim configurations work, and how you can kind of start building your own one, start understanding your own one, and hopefully you'll see another video come out where we'll go a bit more into plugins and setting up a plugin manager, and yeah, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you found it useful, and drop any comments if you have any below, and yeah, thank you.